We are recording.
Hey, everyone out there, thank you for joining the Brotherhood experience today. Today, I'm here with my co-host, JT Hale. We out here. He's over in Atlanta. I'm kicking it in Detroit. We have our visitor today. We have an awesome guy. His name is DonDre Harris. He's coming out of Denver, out of the Denver Black Men Run Foundation organization. They out there handling the nation.
Super out there in Denver. Welcome, DonDre. We're glad to have you, man. Appreciate you stopping by.
Yes, sir. Thank you all for having me. I'm super honored and thankful to be here.
Yeah, so this is part 2 of our mental health awareness series. The first one you saw with Philip Tucker out of Knoxville. He's a licensed therapist and it gave us quite a bit of insight into the mental health awareness, specifically as it relates to Black men. Before we dive into that, tell us a little bit about you, brother.
Oh, I definitely got some big shoes to fill after Philip Tucker. He was amazing. But a little bit about me. My name is DonDre Harris, DonDre Anton Jerome Harris, that is. I always like to share that because I have 4 names.
Wow.
29 years old, enjoying this last year in my 20s. I am by profession a school social worker. Currently working towards a permanent licensure to be a licensed therapist. I currently have a temporary license that lasts 4 years. But for social workers and psychologists, it's a little different journey. But nevertheless, we'll get there. So yeah, like I said, I'm a school social worker, so I'm very passionate about the youth and setting them up for success. I've worked with the aged and disabled population as well. It was good work, but I really, really, really love working with the youth because they're the future. I mean, they're really the now, if you think about it.
Yep.
And I learned a lot from them, so even just being in my role, I always tell my students, don't look at me just as the person that you're going to learn from, because I'm also going to learn from you. Because if I don't learn from you, how can I effectively show up for you? Mm-hmm. So yeah, just super passionate about this role that I'm in. Kind of stepped into it because I wanted more exposure and representation in the school systems when it comes to mental health and Black men being in that role, because it wasn't something that I seen, and I know that I would have benefited from it had I had that representation in the school when I grew up, because I grew up in like low income and single parent household, so it had some some struggles, but overcame it. But yeah, and the most important thing that I would say about myself is that I'm a man of God, so never not acknowledge that. So yeah.
Wow, and we touched on that too in our session with Philip, as far as having that foundation to lean on, building block as far as your mental health self-care.
Absolutely.
And so working with the youth, you're I won't say ground zero, but you're catching the youth at a time when they're still developing mentally, as far as it relates to mental health. Are there things that you see within some of the youth that are dealing with a lot of stuff that my generation didn't really have to deal with, and probably your generation not as much, but the time that we're in now, I wouldn't want to be a kid going to high school.
Yeah, it's a lot. It is, and that's exactly. I work in a high school, and I'm actually at a charter school. It's an alternative high school, so we take students between the ages of 14 and 21. We're kind of like a last stop shop for students, because our school's mission is to end the school to prison pipeline. So we take in students who have been kicked out of other schools, as well as students who other schools won't accept because they have current or previous criminal charges. We believe in, the mental health piece of it, being trauma informed and approaching it from that lens. Because oftentimes, when you look at it, schools were never designed for people of color. That's just the history of it. They were set up for white people. And so, once people of color were able to go to the same schools, they still carried on as if it was for white people. So you have a lot of students of color, even students with disabilities and LGBTQ plus youth, they are receive more punishment and expulsions compared to white students. It's really just, it's disheartening because our student population is majority Hispanic, then Black, with very like a handful of white students. Wow. So it's disheartening. It's all, again, like I said, the school system was never set up for Black people. And then you go back to like the 80s, when during the Reagan administration, where they set up the war on drugs, which was supposed to put more punishment on the people who were using drugs and possession it versus the people who were selling it. And that wasn't an effective thing, because when you look at the statistics, Black students are typically suspended or expelled because of behavioral problems. It's the white students who are expelled for more so drug use or possession. However, the rates for suspension and expulsion are still higher for Black students.
Right.
So it's like, how is this a thing? Then you roll over into the zero tolerance policy. It expands after the Columbine shooting. And I get it, security in schools could have prevented that. Absolutely. Or, cause less people to have to die during that. It was an unfortunate thing.
Right.
However, when you bring in these police officers into the school system, you have triggered Black and brown students, because most of their first interaction with police officers were negative, because most of us come from low income neighborhoods, poverty. So like their first encounter are negative. And so like now they're at school, now they can't focus because officers are here. And we get it. Yeah, I get it, safety. But at the same time, it's doing more harm to the Black students than it is helping them. Even in my school, we don't have security or police officers because, again, our school mission is to end the school to prison pipeline. And we know that if you don't feel safe, you're not in your right mind to focus and obtain and retain information. So we don't have security or police officers at our school. And our students, they're freaking amazing. And like, if a police officer does come, because although we don't have one on payroll, they can show up at any time. And if they do show up, our students are in a panic, like everything is just stopped. Like their focus is, why are they here? What's going on? Like, am I in danger? Am I in trouble? Like, what's going on? So yeah,
that's traumatized. I hate for the presence to be something that triggers students. I think perhaps maybe if there's an interaction of exchange with the officers and the students on a good note, hey, I'm so-and-so, officer so-and-so, feel free to come to me if you have questions about anything, or if you just want to dap me up,
Right.
to make kids feel comfortable, and so they can see that when you see an officer, it's not just, it shouldn't be an automatic, okay, we need to run for cover or break, as like you see them do, Boys in the Hood, because it's not necessarily that somebody did anything wrong. They're here to protect us.
Right.
And so you got one set of students that get that, But for the other set of students, based on their experience or the experience of people that they know, friends and family, that presence means they're not here to protect us, they're here to get us. And
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I invite my students to come run with us all the time. And they're like, Mister, only time I run is if I'm running from the police. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. You got to be freaking kidding me.
joking, but some of them I'm sure mean it, but still joking at the same time. You know, the frame of reference there. And so to me, in my mind, that really kind of centers on, you think about maybe a victim of abuse and how they may make jokes about the abuse in their coping with the abuse, but really is jokes, but it's really not jokes. It's really, you know, it's not a cool thing. But
it's not. So it's like something similar to that. Like they joke about it, but like it's their norm. So like even though they're joking about it, it's still like the reality that they're living. Like I use this bear reference all the time of like if we're walking down the street and you see a bear, like you're gonna get scared. But what happens when you go home every day and the bear is there? Eventually, it becomes your norm. You're no longer scared of the bear. You no longer realize the actual danger of that bear, you know, because you've gotten accustomed to it. And so that's what happens oftentimes with people. Like people get accustomed to like chaos and danger. And so we go into those situations all the time because that's what the norm is. So for us, we're not even seeing, like sometimes when we're in something, like we don't even realize the danger of it. So that's why like I really, really, really tap into my students with self-awareness, you know, like knowing who you are and what you need and your protective factors.
Yeah. And that starts at an early age.
Right.
Very much so. Very, very much so. When you look at rates of like trauma and things, especially like in the school systems, when you look at it, Black students represent 18% of preschool students. And however, 48% of Black preschool students get suspended, like 4-year-old students. This before, like, the lack of representation, the lack of understanding, like that's why we need more teachers, staff, administration, principals, everything of color in school systems.
Absolutely.
Because that also taps into misdiagnosis for Black youth, you know, and they're wondering like, why isn't this child getting better? That we know we've diagnosed them, we've sent them to therapy to work towards you know, reaching these goals and overcoming whatever they're diagnosed with, or put them on this medication. Why is this medication not working for this issue? Because you misdiagnosed them. That's not what we should be focused on. And again, all of these diagnoses were created off of information and data gathered from white people. There's not it's not the same for Blacks. You know, you have to look at it through the cultural lens, and they don't have that. So that's why we need more people of color. Like right now we have 2 Black people working, including myself at my job. But for a couple of months, it was just myself. And one of the Black students, his mom had came to the school one day for something, I don't know, but he would not let her leave until he introduced her to me. He was like, he's just like me, you know, he's a Black man, like, and it's not many of him here, he's the only one. And like, it's not many of us here either. You know, so that representation matters. They see that, they appreciate that. Like I saw his mom walk through the parking lot and I didn't know what was going on. She was like walking towards her car and he was like, no, he like telling her to come back. And then they came and approached me. And I was like, oh, wow, like that means a lot to these students to see somebody that looks like them inside the building.
Man, you said you one of how many? 2?
Yes.
That means you're really for a lot of those children, especially the African Americans. What's the ratio of Blacks to whites in your school?
We're a very small school. We have about 160 students.
Oh wow,
it is small.
Yeah, very, very, very small school. we're probably, let's say, probably like 91 to 92% Hispanic, and then like 6-7% Black, and then 1 to 2% white.
Oh wow, that's way different from my part of the United States, because I was born and raised in Detroit. So 99% of the school was African American children, but the difference is the officers in the school were all Black, which helped out a lot because they were from Detroit also. So they had more of an understanding of what the children were going through, what we went through. And it was interesting because even as I got older, some of the children that I grew up with in high school, they ended up becoming Detroit police officers, and some of them ended up being back into our high school. So that was kind of cool how it recycled for them to always have an understanding of what's going on in school, because they used to be the children their own self.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah.
We don't have a population like that.
Yeah, I mean, this is just our school. Like a lot of the other schools in this area are different. Like I said, we do school totally different where I'm at. But other schools around here, population are very different. Like I visit other schools just to check them out and see what they're doing. So population rates are definitely different there. But the school district, like where I'm at, where it's located, that was a predominantly Hispanic area historically. And so that's why we have a big Hispanic population, but they're freaking gentrifying that area now. So they're trying to push all of them out. It's horrible.
Oh wow.
We didn't have officers in my high school.
Hey, you know what? Let me tell you guys something that's interesting, because after the Columbine and all these other shootings in all these little towns in America, it was like new things were starting to happen. I grew up and it was a norm, like you said. Like in my school, when you came through the door, we had metal detectors in Detroit. I'm sure like New York and major cities, a few of them, we had metal detectors. We came through the school, we took off our book bags, boom, checked out, went through there, bam, boom, made sure we didn't have any knives or guns, and went on about the class. And we thought nothing twice about it, because that in Detroit at that time in the 80s, I remember, like you said about the drugs, the big thing that had came out back then was crack. And then you had cocaine, which was the white children in the white schools was using cocaine, and in the Black schools they were using crack. But when it went to court, whichever kids got caught, the African Americans got a stronger sentence for crack, and the white kids got a lesser sentence for the cocaine in the metro area. And that was an interesting subject. That's a whole nother subject right there. But we were used to going through metal detectors and things back in the 80s, at least in the deep major cities like I came from. It was just normal. But the people that was at the metal detectors, they were all Black and everything, you know. They was, like you said, they were looking out for our safety, basically. And we understood that. We was happy they were here, actually.
Yeah, it makes a difference. That's like representation matters. It really does. That's why it's hard, you know, because being in this education system, you know, they don't always pay the best, you know. But so people are like, I need a livable wage. So some people don't do this even if they're passionate about it. So like that's something that I'm adamant about fighting for, is higher wages for educators, because if you pay us, you know, well, I mean, we want to do the work. Yes, we're passionate about it. Love the students, love, you know, what we're doing. But like, we also don't need to be stressed out as well about if we're able to pay our bills, you know, so.
Amen. And if they pay you more, they're going to have more people enter into that field.
Exactly.
You'd have more males too entering that field.
Yeah.
You know, being a breadwinner, you know, I get it. Sometimes it's just not an option for a lot of men. And I think that's a big reason you have more women in the school system on the ground level than you do men, specifically Black men. And it's not just Black kids that benefit from seeing a Black male in a teacher position. White students also benefit from that. In my opinion, that also can benefit the world because you're shaping perceptions based on your interactions day to day with who is there. You know, you may have a Mr. Johnson, he's the cool teacher, or maybe not be cool, but he's a good teacher, he's a good president, you know, and kids learn about what they see. If they're not seeing something on a daily basis, it's, you know, your perception is what you have learned at home, you know, from your surroundings.
Right.
So, and the other thing that we didn't really have to deal with are all these school shootings. That was never, you know, being a kid now going to school, I would think that's probably on a lot of kids' minds from day to day, because it's become so frequent. It's so commonplace that it's beginning of the year. It's like it just kind of kicks off, and you're like, okay, hopefully we won't have another one for a while. And it's really the same routine over and over. And I just think to myself, when I was a kid, that was the furthest thing from my mind, going to school every day. I hated school. You know, just like any other kid, I was like, school is so boring, long day, felt like 16 hours. But that was the worst for me, not the possibility of school shooting.
Let me tell you something about the when it came to African American shootings. Like, there was a lot of shootings in different African American public schools when I was growing up. But the difference is, a lot of times it was a gang shooting where somebody was shooting a particular person. This crap that came out with these kids going to shoot everybody in the class and all of that, that wasn't even a thought growing up. I remember it was a shooting in my school. But what happened was, a kid was being bullied, and he got sick and tired of being sick and tired, and he took his dad's gun and went after the guy in school. But I never heard of till that Columbine, and then afterwards, it's like everybody started copycatting. Everybody wanted to be famous and start doing that craziness, you know, and then killing themselves. That wasn't even a thought for me growing up. I don't know, in the African American community back in the 70s and 80s, we weren't thinking about killing ourselves. We was thinking about survival. We're trying to survive back then.
Surviving, football games, roller skating, dances, you know.
Exactly.
Trying to be girls, that, you know, that was what kept us occupied, not this stuff. So DonDre, where you are in your field, do you encounter students that have those concerns or express that type of trauma to you, of, you know, what is actually going on in society, the bullying, the worrying about a mass shooting? Does that come up?
Oh, absolutely, all the time. Like, even other schools that I you know, that's in the area that I don't even work at, like we are in communication a lot, and so, like, if they find the guns, they send out alerts, like, you know, this is what's going on over here, because oftentimes it's like you said, one person does it, now somebody else does it. Like, even one of my students told me before that he said he believes, he never saw it, but he said he believed that some students have guns on them, and because of that thought, it makes him want to bring a gun.
Wow.
You know, and so, and us also dealing with bullying. Like, people are like, I'm weak, I can't defend myself, so I feel like I have to bring a weapon to protect myself, you know. And again, with the gang stuff, some people are like, they're involved in gangs, so they're like, I have to keep something on me because anything could happen at any given time, you know. So it's a sad thing to see. But I understand it, because they grow up in these communities, and it's a lot of it is generational. You know, their parents were in gangs and their grandparents were in gangs, and it's rolling over to them. Like, we beef with these people, so you can't be cool with those people. And then they come to school and like, well, my family doesn't like your family, and so now it's the whole thing.
Wow.
So it's like, how do we break these generational curses of beef? It's like, where do we, find peace in this? Where do we lead with love in this? Like, even if I don't like you, that doesn't mean like you have to be my enemy, because everybody's not everybody's cup of tea. We won't like everybody, and that's okay. But just because we agree to disagree doesn't mean that we have to be in shootouts, that we have to fight each other. We can have healthy relationships and healthy boundaries and coexist in the same spaces and both flourish, because it's enough food on the table for you to eat and for me to eat. Like, you never know. It's oh my gosh. And that's another piece. It's also like, all of the things that we do work with the students while they're at school, they don't get those same things at home. So it's like we have to work harder to like implement this stuff into these students, because most students of color, the only mental health services they ever receive is in the school system. They don't typically see outside professionals outside of a school system. The parents, because a lot of the parents just won't engage in and take them to it. So we make outside referrals all the time. And it's like, I'm always saying, like, parents need to be here getting the same services that we are teaching these kids when it comes to social and emotional well-being, because we have parents come in all the time and I'm like, okay, I see the disconnect. I'm not blaming the parent either, because nobody taught them, like, I give grace to everybody. I'm like, okay, it makes sense now, but like, what services can we offer this parent so that they can also heal and be better, and then also be able to provide some emotional and mental support for their child as well, because a lot of them, they just don't know.
Yeah, that's something we talk with Philip about as well. There's often a stigma culturally as far as seeking help for mental health related issues. We just typically and traditionally don't do it. I think the current generation is more likely to, the current generation of adults in our community are more likely to seek out some type of mental health aid versus my generation and older. They just did not do it. That's something that other folks do. You need to go to church and pray. They go to church and pray, but you're still dealing with these issues. What do you do? And so it's, how do you bridge that gap? And then when you have children, and the cycle continues, and we're teaching them what we were taught, either directly or indirectly, and we're bringing up young adults that don't know how to deal with these mental health issues. And so I know one of the things you said you wanted to touch on was the self-awareness of mental health.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so one of the things I always encourage, because I never tell anybody to do anything, because when you force something on somebody, 9 times out of 10, they're going to push it away. So I always just encourage, I always just lay stuff on them for them to think about it. Even if they, don't get it now, I believe in planting the seed. I might not ever see that seed flourish and grow, but 10 years from now, something can happen where they like, this is what Mr. Don was talking about. And then they start nourishing it and watering it, taking care of it, and then they bloom. So my thing is, like, I don't look for the instant gratification or the instant success story. Like, yeah, it's nice to see, absolutely. But if I don't see it, that doesn't mean I don't feel like I failed them, because the seed has been planted. And so I always encourage them to question everything. Oftentimes, even in the school system, students will get in trouble for asking why. And it's like, they look at them like, you're being disobedient. If you give instructions, it's like, well, why do I have to do that? Or why is this? A lot of times students don't understand. So they're not asking why to be disobedient. They're asking why because how you explained it didn't make sense to them. So instead of you feeling like your authority or your ego is being tested, like, step outside of yourself and explain it in a different way. You have, this is what we have to do. And so I encourage them, question everything. Even if they have to ask me a question 1,000 times, I'm going to keep explaining it in a different way until we can get it. Hopefully we get it. But I always use this reference also. Me and my bear analogies. But the Build-A-Bear, y'all familiar with Build-A-Bear?
Absolutely. I took my daughter there before.
Boom. Okay, got it. So I break it down to my students like this. I say, I believe that everybody is a Build-A-Bear. We have, so, you go into the store, the Build-A-Bear, you get the empty bear, you stuff it, you close it up, or, you zip it up, and then boom, go into the world. And I feel like that's what we do with people. When you're born, you're the empty bear. And then you have your family, your school, whomever it is, your village, whether it's church, whatever the organization, whatever community you are in when you're growing up, you have all these people pouring into you and teaching you values and morals and beliefs. But this is things that based off of their values, their morals, their beliefs. And so they're stuffing all of these things into you. Oh, this is what happiness looks like, but that's happiness through their lens. This is what sadness looks like. That's sadness through their lens. Anger and whatever else it may be. They're stuffing all of these things into you. And then, they dress you up, zip you up. And then once you're an adult, they send you out into the world. Now we're out here navigating life. Oh, Auntie Keisha said, this is what happiness looks like. So let me seek happiness this way. Auntie Keisha got the red car. She was happy. Let me go get the red car. I got the red car, but I'm not happy. Something must be wrong with me because Auntie Keisha said, this is how you get happiness,
Oh my goodness.
And so I'm like, we have to question everything because while these people had good intentions on setting us up for success, they were teaching us through their lens, and that might not apply to us. So what we have to do is unclothe the bear, take out all of the stuffing, and sit with it and say, what is it in this stuffing that I want to keep? What actually do I find beneficial for my life? And then you keep that. And then the stuff that you don't, you get rid of it. And guess what? Now your bear isn't full. So now you have to do the work to figure out what's happiness, what's joy, what's peace, what's love, like what does all of these things look like for you? And then you stuff it back up and you zip it up. And now you have your own identity. Now you know who you are. Now you know what you need. It's a big difference between needs and wants. You out here living life through the lens of other people, going after what you think you need, and that's not what it is. And so we're constantly chasing satisfaction in this or happiness in this and joy in this. And then again, like I said, we always come back to something must be wrong with me because it's not working. It's not clicking. And it's like, no, nothing is wrong with you. You just don't know who you are. You have to figure out who you have to figure out who you are in order to, because your happiness might be the blue car, not the red one, and that's okay. And that's okay.
Okay.
Somebody might say you have to go to college to be successful. School might not be for you. You might want to go get your CDLs and drive trucks or something.
Right.
Look, you might want to be a painter. You might want to be a yoga instructor. That's probably what makes you happy. Like you have to know what you need. And the biggest thing about it is that a lot of times people don't want to question everything that they know because they feel like it's a slap in the face to their family and the people who, poured into them, but it's not. Again, they intended well, but like it's up to us to truly create our own identity. Like grateful for those people, absolutely, but that was for them. It's time for me to get me. So we're Build-A-Bears, and unless we unpack it and deal with it, we will always live life through the lens of other people and not our own. And so we will miss things all the time.
Absolutely.
That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work.
Oh, trust me, I've gone through it myself. It is a lot of work. It's uncomfortable.
It's not.
It's uncomfortable work. It's challenging. It's not an easy thing. It's an emotional roller coaster, because you're taking out pieces that you thought were you, and so it's really something to sit with. And it's not an overnight process, and it's not your thing. It's not just this straight up. It's a roller coaster, up, down, upside down. It's whole thing.
It's a marathon.
Yeah, exactly.
Also marathon.
Okay, yes, absolutely. You're gonna need aid stations along the way, the whole process.
Man.
It is. And
You gonna get some blisters. You're gonna get some blisters.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But the beauty of the end result,
lose a toenail.
No, seriously, you're gonna come out with some bruises, some burns, some scrapes, some cuts, some stitches. You're gonna come out some staples, maybe, But the beauty of it is that you come out with the reward that no one can take from you, your own identity.
Mm-hmm.
No one can take that from you. Then you're able to place healthy boundaries in your life. If you live in a world with no healthy boundaries, people will come in and do anything.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Absolutely.
frustrated. You can figure out why, but it's like you're a part of the problem. You're allowing people to come into your world to do whatever they want to do. And if you don't know what you need or how to put a healthy boundary in place, they're going to continue to do it.
Yes. No doubt.
Very profound. Very profound.
Yeah.
Or as I like to say, you can't tell me how my shoes fit.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can.
You can't tell me how my shoes fit. You can tell me how they look on my feet, but you can't tell me how my shoes fit.
I like that.
Interesting.
Yeah, self-awareness is the biggest piece. I'm always tapping into them. I ask them simple questions. I even ask them like just simply, like even like they ask you in interviews, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And they're like, I don't have strengths and weaknesses. I'm like, yes, you do. Let's sit down and then just through conversation. I'm like, you just identified them. They like, what? I'm like, yeah, that's a strength. They're like, how is that a strength? I'm like, because you're standing up for yourself. That's a skill of self-advocacy. They're like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. So also helping them put language to stuff.
Right. Right. That's awesome.
It is. And you'll be continuously discovering throughout life. Even
absolutely
at this age, I'm still discovering strengths.
Yes.
About myself.
And they change. And that's what I tell my students. I say, let's identify your strengths and weaknesses because everybody has weaknesses. But the thing about identifying our weaknesses is that they don't have to remain weaknesses. We can move those weaknesses to our strength side if we put in the work and the effort, And again, like you said, we're constantly going through life, new days, new experiences, new exposure. So something we never knew was a weakness, we come across and like, oh, wow, I never knew this was a weakness of mine, and now I can decide, do I leave this as a weakness or do I make it a strength, So yeah, it's not, it's self-identity and self-discovery again. Like you said, it's an ongoing process because each day we live, we learn, we have new experiences. If I walked outside right now and saw a murder, I'm not going to be the same person I was. I'm not. I'm just not. Right. I'm not going to be the same person, And so, yeah, that's something that I also let them know as well. Like, don't think you get to a place and like, this is who I am, this is who I will always be. Like some things at the core will always be in us, absolutely. Some things you just can't shake. Like me and my cleaning, it's just at the core of me. Like I just can't stop cleaning. My coworkers like, you still spraying Clorox spray. I'm like, I know, but I can't help it. But like some parts of me, like it changes. That's why one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in life is to stop saying what you won't do, because you never know what you will do until you get put into a situation where you might have to do that thing that you said you wouldn't do.
Amen.
So,
that's right.
Like, stop saying what you want to do because you just don't know.
Yeah. So DonDre, I know you deal with the kids. That we just talked about in your chapter. Have you seen similar trauma, or have you been able to get any of the brothers who need the mental health first aid? That's what Philip Tucker did, certification on mental health first aid responder. Have you carried any of that into the chapter?
I'm always tapping into my guys on mental health stuff. I actually had never heard of the mental health first aid instructor until I listened to Phil's episode or whatever. And so it inspired me. I'm like, oh, wow, this is a thing. So it inspired me. I'm actually going through that same training next month. So
nice.
Yeah. Putting me on. Yes, sir. I'm super pumped about it. But what I'm working on right now, and it's also something that I'm going to be doing for like the regional meetups. I don't know if I probably should have said that, but
That's fine.
But one thing that I'm currently working on right now with the Denver chapter is healing circles. And so I use 3 questionnaires. So two of them were created elsewhere. One is like adverse childhood experiences, and then the other survey was the positive childhood experiences. And so I using those to collect data from them to figure out like how much trauma they've experienced as children, as well as how much positive experiences they've experienced, during their childhood. Because oftentimes, although we experience a lot of trauma as children, if we have a lot of positive support around us, like it can still help us like flourish and be resilient and overcome those things. But if we don't have that, it could be, the total opposite. So if we have a trauma with no support, no positive experiences, then, not so much the same route. And then I also created my own list of questions that got pretty deep. So I'm just right now I'm just waiting for all the guys to send back their surveys. And once I collect all of that data, I'm going to create curriculum and activities for us to get together to do. So that way I can tap into all of their needs to help them start their healing processes or continue their healing processes, depending on where they are, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, socially, like emotionally, like all of the things. And so, because again, with them, I can't just go in and say, oh, do this or try this out if I don't know their experience. So again, I'm going to them to learn from them. I sent them the questionnaires. I just didn't decide to create curriculum and activities for them to do, because if I set up an activity around depression and they're not depressed, they anxious, they dealing with anxiety, it's not going to do them no justice. Right. So again, I set that up that way, sent it out to them, waiting for all of them to send back the survey so I can use all of that data to be intentional and meet all of their needs as best as I can during these healing circles. So I'm super, super excited about it. They're super excited about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's a great thing. We should have that go throughout the whole BMR nation. I like that. That's awesome.
That is amazing and well needed.
It is. I mean, us just simply getting together to fellowship and run and all the things that we do together, that in itself is good mentally and emotionally for us. I know a lot of us have shared with each other, like, I was in the funk today and then I came out and ran and now I'm feeling better with you guys. I remember one day I went out running with one of the guys. His name is Bobby, and I got out of my car and he immediately was like, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, "Oh, nothing." So I'm like, "It's okay, like nothing. It's all good." And so he was like, "Okay," he didn't push up on it. He was like, "Oh, okay." Because even us mental health professionals, we still deal with stuff too. We still have feelings and emotions. It's a thing. That's why they say a lot of therapists have therapists. But we went on a run and then we came back when we finished the run and he asked it again. He said, "Okay, what's wrong with you?" And I was like, all right, here we go. Like, well, after we had that run, then, and was able to chat about some other stuff, like I was in a better place to express what I was actually going through. And then we sat and talked, and he was able to support me, He's not a mental health professional, but, he has some basic skills to, tap into that. And so when I heard about the mental health first aid thing, I was like, oh, I got to tap into that so I can teach these people, teach them the same things, so needed. And it's the basic, like, you're not a mental health professional going through the course, but like, basic skills to help somebody in that moment. And, that gives you time to actually help them get to the next level, So if we're all equipped to handle stuff in the moment, it's really beneficial. And like, so I'm thinking about through the lens of like helping, BMR as well as in the school, because teachers have also come to me and like, well, this student was doing this or saying this, and I didn't know what to say or how to approach them. So it's also something that I'm going to be implementing with the staff at my school too.
That's great. That is good, because it puts you in a position to be a link to someone getting what they need. Again, we're not licensed. You're studying to be a licensed therapist. I'm not a licensed therapist, but if I have info that I can direct you to,
Right.
that to me, that's half the battle. And then of course, for them to follow through with seeking and getting whatever help they need. Otherwise, people just sink.
Yes, sir.
And we've seen the result of that. And it's not, sometimes it's explosive, sometimes it's a slow death.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't want anyone to, handle it that way. And you don't have to, but if you don't know, you don't have resources, again, people sink. So
They do.
I'm glad Philip did the series, the mental health first aid responder certification. And I think the goal, he is going forward, going to do some more captains, but I think it will eventually be open to everyone. And it's a good tool. It's a very good tool.
Yeah, it is. And what I've read so far is that people who are become certified instructors for mental health first aid, like you can co-facilitate. So once I get this thing cracking, I'm hoping he'll be down to co-facilitate some of those with me.
I'm
nice.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Twin power.
There you go. There you go. And I know one thing that y'all tapped into also was because y'all session was right around the Twitch situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so like talking about having those good support systems in your life. And so one thing that I saw, one thing that I also seen in that is that like we have to, as Black people, we have to stop being reactive and start being more proactive, because in the history of therapy, Black people are more prone to signing up to see a therapist once something happens that's like to somebody like that. So like therapists saw an increase of Black men reaching out for services after Twitch committed suicide. And it's like if we're already doing the work, we don't have to like wait to see something for us to like respond to it. So like I'm trying to figure out like what do we do to bridge that gap to helping people understand that don't wait till something tragic happens to seek services.
Right.
And another thing was like the support systems. So a lot of people were saying, oh, you got to check on your strong friends because, Twitch was such a good person, such a happy, such uplifting person and stuff like that. Like, make sure y'all check on y'all strong friends. Your strong friends need support too. Whether they're a strong friend or weak friend, whatever it may be, people need support regardless, And the thing is that we have to do a better job at creating safe and comfortable environments and spaces for people, because we get so accustomed and used to that work environment dialogue where you walk in, oh, good morning, how are you? I'm great, how are you? Just the small talk. But we have to be intentional with our questions, because sometimes we say, how are you? And then people start pouring really how they are, they really go deep. And then they see the look on our face or our body language and like, they don't want to hear this. This is making them uncomfortable.
Right.
And so then that scars them. So the next time somebody asks them how they are and they're doing bad, they won't open up and say anything.
Wow.
So we have to be intentional with the word choices that we use. I'm very big on that. So if
that's
I don't have it is.
That's a nugget.
This is free game. This is free game. So if I don't have the capacity to take in whatever a person may be feeling or going through, I don't ask them how they are. I don't care if they say, oh, that was they rude. I asked them how they were doing. He didn't ask me back. What I will say is, I hope you're doing well. That's a statement. That doesn't open the door for you to tell me how you're doing. If I ask you, how are you doing? That opens up the door. That's me letting you know I have the capacity to take on whether it's good, bad, ugly, whatever it may be. I'm very intentional with that, whether it's work-related, dealing with my students, family, friends. I am very intentional with that. So we have to make sure that when we are checking on people and reaching out to them, our strong friends or whatever, whomever it may be, that we actually have the capacity in that moment to handle whatever it is they may say. Because if not, they're going to feel that energy and it's going to put a bad taste to them. And then they might not ever open up to anybody else. Then they're going to suffer in silence, which can lead to depression, which can lead to suicide, So we have to do a better job at ourselves with being intentional when we're actually asking people how they're doing.
Mm-hmm. And be eager to listen. You'll find that sometimes people just want somebody to listen to them versus listening to fix their problem, listening to rush to judgment. Sometimes people just need an ear.
That's it.
And they need to feel comfortable. You're not comfortable with everybody, but hopefully there's at least one or two people in your circle that you are comfortable with if you need to unload or seek answers to something. And that's something that we try to create within the Brotherhood, within individual chapters and across chapters.
Absolutely.
It's very important. I'm very comfortable with quite a few of the brothers that I've met and bonded with, not just in my chapter, but throughout the entire Brotherhood. And I hope that's something that all the brothers do. I think it just makes us a stronger brotherhood. And then it branches out into, your friends, your family, your community, your jobs. And the world is a better place for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And always be in the position to learn, not being in that space of can't nobody tell me anything, or you don't know nothing. Step outside of yourself and what you know, because you might miss something if you don't, And like I said, Bobby isn't a mental health professional, but he teaches me a lot. He's very intentional too with when we're in conversation, he'll say, would you care for me to respond to this? Is it okay if I share this? Is it okay if I give an opinion or suggestion or recommendation before just jumping into it? Because I might not need that in that moment, but he always asks. And so that has inspired me and, taught me to be more mindful too in the midst of my conversations, instead of just pouring or assuming somebody wants to hear an opinion or a suggestion or recommendation, but stopping and asking hey, you just shared this, did you just need an ear? Do you want a response? So it is very, very good to be intentional with those communication skills.
Okay, I wasn't sure. The dog his little cage is right next to the table, and it just goes in there and goes to sleep. So he's old, so he'll go in there and go to sleep sometime, and he snores like an old man. I'm like, can they hear this? I hope they can't hear this. But thank goodness.
How we looking out there on
I think
time?
We're right at the 45-minute mark. Like I said, the time goes by very quickly. Very quickly. DonDre, brother, we appreciate you coming on, taking time out for not just us, but for the entire Brotherhood, sharing your expertise and point of view and experience and knowledge with us. Enjoyed talking with you. I'm sure we'll be talking with you again. For sure.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yes, sir.
Yeah, enjoy.
Yeah. Thanks for being on the show. And in the words of Les Brown, so give yourself a break. Stop beating yourself up. Everyone makes mistakes, has setbacks and failures. You don't come with a book on how to get everything right all the time. You will fail sometimes, not because you plan to, but simply because you're human. Failure is part of creating a great life. You all out there in the listening audience, I want you all to take this in. Listen, if you have to listen to this again, go back to the first episode of part 1 and check that out. You have just experienced the Brotherhood.
Yes, sir.